Chris, I know you're a video game guy just like me, and I was over the weekend perusing my Nintendo Switch collection, and dude, they added, remember F-Zero? Remember like Captain Falcon, F-Zero, those games for the
I
Super
wasn't a
Nintendo?
I wasn't a big like that's like I mean like Super Nintendo for me it was like Mario and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I was like
They
hardcore
added
in that stuff.
F-Zero 99. It's a battle royale, and I've been addicted to it.
Nice.
Except for when I'm watching football. And a good afternoon, everybody, on a Victory Monday for you. This is the Southside Beat, of course, every Monday through Friday, streaming from 3 to 3:30 Eastern here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. My name is Corey Crisan. Joining me, as always, is Chris Halicke on a Victory Monday, a
Victory
football
Monday.
Victory Monday for you, Chris,
Woo!
on this September 25th, 2023. Steelers 23, Raiders 18. Not everything's fixed, though, Chris, and we'll get into that shortly as this program goes along.
No, but the Steelers are 2-1. I mean, I think all things considered, if you were to just look at the win-loss results and you look for the first 3 weeks, that just about everybody would take 2-1. Now, obviously, we're going to dive into a little bit more of why they're still concerned with this team, but hey, 2-1 is 2-1, and they didn't look like an absolute train wreck last night.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, I mean, take the wins when you can get them. We talked about the Raiders and Texans being two games in which the Steelers can try to get some things right, and they looked better last night. So, as Steelers Nation says, here we go.
Nice to have you all with us on a Monday afternoon.
Yes,
it feels like fall. First day of fall hit over the weekend. It feels like
fall here.
Oh, it does here, definitely.
That's awesome.
We had football weather in the Steel City on Saturday.
That's awesome.
Over at Aperture for whatever that Pitt football game was. But it is a Victory Monday, and Chris, like we do on Victory Mondays, we start positive. The Steelers are 2-1. We start positive. The positive for me, Chris, is that TJ Watt's the best player in football again.
Yeah.
He's unstoppable.
Yeah.
He's actually unstoppable over these first 3 games. 6 sacks in 3 games, a whole lot more pressures. He's creating opportunity for Alex Highsmith. He's creating opportunity now for Keanu Benton, who broke through. Just absolute breakthrough for his first career sack, and he looked amazing in Week 3 against the Raiders. This is the return of TJ Watt, and I don't care what Pro Football Focus says. I don't care what NFL, PR graphics say about the top edge rushers in the league. TJ Watt's been dominant, and these last 3 weeks, really the last 2 with the victories, have become about the dominance and the jubilation of TJ Watt, really. And Chris, we've said it last week. We were asked last week, and I don't remember who said it specifically. Are the Steelers going to win this football game, meaning against the Raiders, on defense or offense? And the answer, until further notice, is going to be defense because of 90. And it's just that simple, that this defense is going to give that offense, for as long as it needs to figure it out, the best chance to win football games.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I was talking about when we were talking about like Steelers predictions for records and stuff like that. It's like if TJ Watt is healthy, and I mean like legitimately healthy for 14 or 15 games this year, this team has a legitimate chance of being a playoff contender, even in a loaded AFC. And it's just because he does mean that much. And like you go throughout the course of his career, when he's on the field, this team generally wins. When he's not on the field, they generally lose.
Yes.
That was the case last year. It's been the case throughout his career. And, here the Steelers are probably not good enough to be a 2-1 team, but he and the defense were phenomenal in Week 2, contributed 2 touchdowns last night. They were good again. They were really good again. They made Jimmy Garoppolo uncomfortable. Even with the 4 sacks, they made him throw 2 really costly interceptions. The third one obviously is at the end of the game, but 2 costly interceptions. They made him uncomfortable. They made him make throws that he didn't want to make. Rico Costa chiming in. Do $20 first off. Thank you so much for the contribution. And Rico is trying to rain on the parade a little bit, and it's fine. It's fine. The truth is still the truth. Rico says Canada still sucks. The play calling in the fourth quarter was disgraceful. The D was totally gassed at the end. Thank God for McDaniel's stupidity. Yes, Josh McDaniels can't do basic arithmetic.
Wow.
Said that there was still going to be another possession needed. not when you're only down by 8 points, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion.
And he said after the game, he doubled down on it. He said after the game, we needed 2 scores there. No, you didn't.
Yeah, no,
you needed 1 score there. Thank you, Rico, for the $20 contribution.
Thank you so much.
Greatly
That's
appreciate
awesome.
that. So,
and don't worry, we'll get plenty into Matt Canada and
So yes, as the title of the show suggests, there's visible signs of improvement. Number one.
Yeah.
And when I saw the Kenny Pickett rainbow to Calvin Austin, I said, okay, this is good.
That was a legit throw.
Okay.
Legit.
Good throw by Kenny. Good draw up by Matt Canada to get Calvin Austin open. Nice job by Calvin Austin. Okay. And then you say to yourself, let's see it again. Meaning, let's see the Steelers put something again on the football field that is explosive, that is going to get receivers open downfield, because to borrow a Mike Tomlin phrase from a week ago, 2 is a pattern.
Yeah.
It can happen once, but you need to see it happen more than once with this team. And I forget who mentioned it already. Mr. Nick of Time here actually did. He called 1 good drive. And you know what? That might be a fair assessment by this point, that he called it was a really good drive.
I haven't had a chance to go completely through the film yet. That's more of a Tuesday into Wednesday thing for me.
Sure.
I've kind of started to kind of dip my toe into the pool there. I'm more focusing on putting together the file for previewing the Texans next week. But
right.
Listen, the play on the long touchdown to Calvin Austin was also a good play call against the type of defense that the Raiders typically run. It was it was a good call, and it was just good execution all around. And hats off to Kenny Pickett for holding on. I mean, for literally standing in the pocket's being pushed back, still steps up and fires a dart. It was just a really, really great throw. Credit where, give credit where credit is due. That drive, I think if we would have seen more plays executed earlier on, whether it be in the 49ers game or the Browns game, I think we would have already seen a pretty good drive. I'm not trying to give, I understand people are like, you're trying to bail out Matt Canada. I'm really not. But what I'm saying is, if there were some other plays that were executed in in the first 2 games, we might have already seen a pretty decent drive, because sometimes all it takes is 1 or 2 big plays to make a drive go. But that drive was well called. It was well executed. They mixed things up. They did some stuff over the middle of the field. They did a couple of play action. I mean, it was refreshing, and it was just going to show that this offense is capable of doing things, even with Matt Canada's concepts and his schemes and his system. It's just, how do you continuously keep the defense on their heels? And man, they did it on that one drive for sure.
Last night's game was a really great example of how one play can alter and be the difference between a win and a loss.
Oh my gosh, it was almost near the end.
And there was more than one of those one plays, right?
Yeah.
McDaniel's going full bonehead and kicking the field goal when you're down 8. The Keanu Benton sack, which that was a wide open touchdown to Jacoby Myers. If he's not in that backfield.
Yeah.
And number 3, Marcus Peters dropping the pick 6 that Kenny Pickett threw right to him.
I'd say number 4 would be the Minka roughing the passer call too.
That as well. I mean, there were literally, we're not absolving the Steelers of everything here. There were good moments in this game that need to be discussed and that can be built upon. Yeah. But it's very blatant to see that this game, it's a 1-score game, a 5-point game. It could have gone either way at multiple points throughout the night. And that's even with TJ Watt dominating and Keanu Benton having his best game out of 3 and Kenny Pickett looking as good as he's looked in a while. And this is against the Raiders team that's just not great. Maybe comparing in the AFC West to the Broncos, I don't know now. But, there's still a ways to go for this team. And I've seen multiple comments about Presley Harvin. Yes, special teams was a massive factor in a general sense. Yeah. And this was Presley's 2nd good game in a row. This is why I was charting the punter wars in Latrobe, Chris. This is why I was watching Presley Harvin and Trevor and Braden Mann, on the punts. But
I mean, we've seen Presley Harvin have really good moments in the past, and that's the thing is, I remember like a punt in a clutch situation in Atlanta last year where he downed them, inside their own 5-yard line, and that really helped. Like that put their backs against the wall. That really helped put that, put that game on ice. this time they need, instead of like more of a an angled punt or a touch, punt to try to pin him inside the 20. It's just boot it and try to put it near the sideline and see what happens. And that's exactly what he did. Presley Harvin's been great this year. Yeah, he's had a couple of bad ones, but no punter's gonna be perfect every time. Mm-hmm. And from where he's come from, it's refreshing to see Presley Harvin be good way more often than he's had any shanks or anything like that. He's been good.
He has,
and it looks like Boz is back too, and that's get it to the 40-yard line. Just get it to the 40-yard line and get yourself 3 points at least.
A lot of positives from Chris Boswell. Now Kenny Pickett, 16 of 28, 235, and 2 touchdowns. The Steelers get to Jimmy Garoppolo a lot, and they force 3 interceptions out of him. Yeah. 2 from Levi Wallace, and one of the points that we were stressing at the end of last week was the secondary.
Man, Levi made me eat my words, man.
And how it's just not – me too. I made the joke that he couldn't cover a bed with the sheet. He made me look made me look bad too.
Like middle of the game, for anybody who knows or doesn't know, we have live files on our site on DKPittsburghSports.com for like 4 games. And so like we're in the chat, we're all talking and everything like that. And it gets to a point early in the game where I'm like, I've seen enough of Levi Wallace. It's been horrendous this year. And then right after that dude just turns it around, complete 180. I'm like, man, my foot tastes real good right now. It was
Davante Adams, by the way. This is a bit of a concern. And again, nothing is completely absolved. I think that's a bit of a theme here. They won the football game, which is the important thing, but not everything is absolved. This is the 3rd week in a row where the top receiver from the other team just really put it on the Steelers. It was Brandon Ayuk in week 1. Amari Cooper had a good game in week 2, and that was on top of what Nick Chubb before he got hurt and then Jerome Ford were able to do for Cleveland. Davante Adams, 13 catches, 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, first off, if you had him in fantasy football, congrats. Second off, you can't be giving these gash plays up and these gash amounts of yards up. This is the pattern now. 3 weeks in a row where the top receiver on the opposition has had a really good game against the Steelers. And this goes back to your concerns about Levi Wallace, about my concerns about Joey Porter Jr. not getting a lot of snaps, about my concerns about Patrick Peterson not playing well in his first 2 games. And then they turned it around a little bit, I think, on Sunday. But that secondary, again, not everything is absolved with that secondary.
Yeah, I mean, last night, I'm not going to give, okay, so week 1, I don't like doing this, but I almost want to give a pass because, when we're talking about, if there's any week where a team gets any kind of pass for looking really bad, it's week 1, especially when there's a lot of changes, and there were a lot of changes on defense. I mean, the entire second level of the defense is completely remade other than Mark Robinson. And yes, what the linebackers do absolutely impacts what the secondary does. Mm-hmm. So I almost want to give a pass. Almost. Not quite, but almost. Amari Cooper has usually done well since he went to the Browns. He's usually done well against the Steelers. So that one didn't surprise me. Davante Adams was the only guy who really caught any passes for the Raiders last night. Mm-hmm. I mean, who else caught a pass? Like, I'll have to pull up the box score to see if anybody else caught more than one pass last night, because it sure didn't seem like it. Seemed like every time Garoppolo was dropping back, it was to Davante Adams. I mean, that's just what it seemed
Myers
like.
Said 7 for 85. So even then, like, if you want to construe that as, if you take away all of what Davante did, that's still a good game for any one.
Yeah.
A 7 for 85 line. That's still a good game for a 1. So again,
I'm not saying the secondary was phenomenal or anything like that. No. But and then another part of it is the Steelers also just did not let the Raiders run the football either, and so that was part of the whole, make them one-dimensional, make them throw the ball. I mean, you definitely don't want Josh Jacobs running all over you, and outside of a couple of good runs kind of near the end, Josh Jacobs was pretty much a non-factor. And I think if you were to completely neutralize either one of Josh Jacobs or Davante Adams, that's a win for the defense.
Sure.
So the Raiders are going to get their yards somehow, and they didn't get it on the grounds. They were only able to get through the air. And then the Steelers being up 23-7 late in the game obviously changes the Raiders' game plan. They have to throw the ball more often.
Well, that being said, the Steelers' pass defense is 9th worst in the NFL when it comes to giving up yards through 3 games. So again, not everything absolved, but again, there's so many positives to stress from this. And the big one, to go along with the title of the show, is the visible signs of improvement showed from the Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett offense.
It looked like a better team last night for sure.
They looked like more of a unit together. And look, not everybody played well. Chuks Okorafor got beat quite a few times by Max Crosby. There wasn't everything all together for the offensive line quite yet. Calvin Austin, really encouraging signs. Kenny Pickett, obviously, really encouraging signs.
Yeah.
I thought the running game was at least better than it was in the first couple of weeks. So right now, again, this is going to be a gradual process. And now Matt Canada has to put it together for another week in a row. Yeah. This has to become pattern behavior for the Steelers. As long as the defense holds like it does, and it's able to create havoc like it does, with obviously TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith leading the way. As long as this offense can find ways to do just enough, just like it did last night, it'll put the Steelers at minimum in position to win games.
Yeah, Holden 92 says Chuks has been brutal. Let's just be honest. As a whole, for the first 3 games, the entire offensive line has been pretty brutal. Last night was the first time I saw real hope on the offensive line. And I'm even talking about it as the entire unit. Mason Cole still didn't have a really good game. I think he was the worst graded on Pro Football Focus. And I think that kind of matches the eye test when you look at the starting 5 from last night. I do think Mason Cole might've been probably the worst of the bunch. But he still had some really good blocks and run blocking. It was good to see the run blocking actually do something. They did a decent amount of some gap schemes. They ran more inside zone, which I liked seeing the Steelers attacking the middle of that Raiders defense. Like that looks to me like they had a game plan. They wanted to attack, and there still needed to be more passes over the middle of the field. But the Raiders are the weakest on defense in the middle of their defense, and running more inside zone than outside zone, that's not normal. The Steelers are typically a predominantly outside zone team. So when you run more inside zone and you throw more passes over the middle, that actually goes to show we have a game plan to attack where they're weakest. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to see more often. More of it, please.
I want to address a few comments here. Ryan, I saw articles, stories saying Canada's role is expanded. Is this true?
Yeah, we need to address this.
I haven't heard anything on that. Now, the word going around is that Matt Canada has been given essentially more responsibility working directly with Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
This doesn't, say Mike Sullivan was fired as the quarterback coach or anything like that, or Glenn Thomas has a reduced role. Nothing is saying about that. This is more about Matt Canada's direct involvement with Kenny Pickett. And I haven't heard anything on it personally, from just the last couple of days here, but if true, okay, if we're going to assume that Matt Canada's role has quote unquote increased, then maybe this is a different way for him to not only learn more about Kenny's strengths and learn more about Kenny's weaknesses, but also kind of to give, and this is from Mike Tomlin, to give Matt Canada more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? More like gravitas, more like of a confidence, like more something, just to say, hey, we believe in you to this point. Go work with this quarterback directly that you know so well. So this was a really interesting thing for me to read over the weekend, at least when it comes to Matt Canada.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. First off, when it comes to a report like that, if it's only coming from one person and it's not somebody who's really close to the team,
yes,
and that person's not named Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not going to Jordan Schultz is, for the most part, especially, whenever you're going through free agency and the offseason and things like that, and you're following all the national reporters, Jordan Schultz, I think, batted 1,000 when it came to stuff like that. Or if he didn't bat 1,000, he was really freaking close. So I'm not trying to question his reporting. I've obviously worked in the industry. I don't like to be questioned whenever I'm reporting something if I know it to be true.
Yeah.
That being said, with him not being that close to the team, I'm not saying it's not true. I just take it with a grain of salt, especially whenever it seemed a little like it was kind of confusing. Like we put it in the Steelers feed on the site because, it's a report. It's gonna, if it's true, it's going to be something that the people are obviously going to talk about. But as offensive coordinator, shouldn't he already be working with Kenny Pickett kind of closely anyway? I mean, so is he kind of taking over more directly, like more of a Mike Sullivan type thing? So if that's the case, then what does Mike Sullivan do? And if Matt Canada's still calling the plays, then he's still the offensive coordinator. So the whole thing was just kind of confusing. So, it is what it is. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. And I haven't, talked to anybody in the organization about it. So it is what it is. I mean, regardless, we know that Matt Canada is the one in charge of the offense. That's the most important thing. And so if he's doing more with Kenny Pickett, good, I guess. Like if this offense is going to work, they should be talking more. I don't know.
Now, Mike Tomlin will talk tomorrow. Tomlin will talk tomorrow, so perhaps this is something that he addressed.
Yeah.
Maybe even perhaps from a question from a certain Southside Beat co-host. Joey brings up we need better tackles, offensive tackles for sure. We need to address right tackle this offseason, and B. Phil follows that immediately with why is Chuk still playing. Now, look, they have tested Broderick Jones at right tackle.
Yeah.
And Dan Moore has practiced as a swing tackle. And this is dating to Latrobe by this point, with Dan Moore at least. So if they feel that Chuk's play is inadequate, which it kind of is right now, it's not really, what they're looking for at right tackle. And I think that's just being objective and watching the games. Yeah. Then they'll make that change, or they might feel inclined to make that change. And Chuk's contract's coming up soon. There's going to be a decision to be made at right tackle. Did you draft Broderick Jones to play right tackle? Likely no. But that doesn't mean that Dan Moore can't swing over or Broderick Jones can't learn right tackle. Yeah. And before the draft happened, this was a point that I brought up when the case was made for Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, a true right tackle, somebody that if they felt Dan Moore was going to come along and develop like he has, obviously he has to a point where he won the starting job over the first-round pick, then you can make the case to say, well, let's replace Chukes on the right side with a Darnell Wright or a Broderick Jones or whoever it might have been. Yeah. So I'm not going to say Chukes is on the hot seat just yet because, again, the Steelers, until it's that bad, they're not going to pull the plug. But another case where you just kind of never know what they're going to do at that right tackle spot. But that said, they're giving themselves at least options over there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the offensive line play, as long as they continue to see improvement like week after week, I think that's what's most important because, listen, last year the offensive line was awful in the first half of the season. They were bad. Now, 2 new members of the offensive line last year, like they there were kinks to work out. And when this is primarily a zone running team, which it is, zone requires not only a lot of athleticism, but it requires like really, really like good cohesive communication. Because it's not as simple as I got a guy lined up in my gap. That's who I'm blocking. It's not that simple. And it gives the running back, there's benefit to zone running. It gives the running back multiple options. Here's your primary attack point. If that's gone, because the linebacker filled it, then the middle should be open. And if the middle's not open, then it should be a cutback lane. If everybody's doing their jobs, you should have multiple options.
Yes.
And that's the good thing about zone running, and that's why you want to do it. However, when it's not working and the guys are not working together and they're not communicating well, they're not, James Daniels isn't chipping this guy enough. So, Mason Cole can't get over to a 3 technique. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong if you're not all working together. And so as long as you continue to see continuous improvement week after week, then I think it's okay. The first 2 or 3 games, I don't think it's enough to be like, okay, that's it. We're writing Chukes off. We're writing Mason Cole off. It's not enough to do that. I don't think. I think that just give it a few more games. Let's see what happens, especially let's get on the other side of the bye week. If the offensive line is still really struggling by then, you have the trade deadline to try to possibly work something out.
Now, that being said, more improvements were shown yesterday than they were against the Browns. Damon brings up, thank God the team made it home safe today. That could have gotten ugly with the plane engine messing up. Yeah. The Steelers are probably just getting home. They were supposed to be home at about 5:30 a.m. local time, Pittsburgh time.
Yeah.
However, the plane had to make an emergency landing in Kansas City because of an engine issue in their charter. Yeah. And they sat on that same plane for, I believe it was about 8 hours once they landed in Kansas City before they deplaned and gotten a new one to come home. So, obviously everybody's safe. The team has marked everybody safe. and they're en route back to Pittsburgh. Crystal asks about the offense.
She has another question. We need to bring up two of her questions.
We'll go here first. And nice work by Crystal today. Can Kenny audible out? Najee's run design showed run, and the defense showed run stop. What gives? We mentioned this last week, and yes, he can. We mentioned this last week when it comes to Kenny Pickett at the line of scrimmage, and yes, he's able to audible out. But this is more about the designs that Matt Canada employs on the field. There are visible, tangible tells that the Steelers are running the football or the Steelers are throwing the football. Yeah. If you look at the percentage of time that they run the football under center, it is massive. If they look at the percentage of time they run the football when a certain player goes in motion, it is massive. Nobody was surprised by the Connor Hayward fullback dive on 3rd and 1 that was stuffed in the first quarter. Nobody was shocked by it. Nobody's hardly shocked by anything that the Steelers throw at them, unless it becomes creative like a Calvin Austin and somebody's able to make a play for him. Now, yes, Kenny can audible out of that, but that also has to come with the fluid motion, literally speaking, the fluid motion of the play of itself. If Matt Canada's calling for Kenny Pickett to put Calvin Austin in motion, Kenny Pickett's got to put Calvin Austin in motion. So he could design and maybe audible out of that and maybe audible into a pass or audible into, something different as far as the run's concerned. But this is more from a design flaw than it is a Kenny or an execution flaw than anything else.
Okay, so really quick, Haj 3115 says gap blocking scheme looks a lot better than the zone blocking scheme the O-line have been trying. If you're basing that off of what Chris Collinsworth was saying last night, Chris Collinsworth apparently doesn't know what an inside zone run looks like because I'm not saying every single time. There were times that it was gap, but there were absolutely times where he was saying it was gap or saying that it was man or whatever it was, and it was absolutely an inside zone run. So Chris Collinsworth apparently doesn't know what that looks like. Nothing against Chris. I like Chris, but that he was wrong on that. Crystal also says Nate Herbig should be allowed to play center, sit Mason. That is counterproductive when it comes to the communication that I was talking about. Mason is the main communicator up there because he's the center. Yep. You got to give him some time, especially with what he did last year. He took over, became a leader for that offensive line, became a pretty good center last year. Not amazing, not like top 5 or top 10 in the league, but definitely a serviceable center, but also a really good communicator. You don't just throw that away after 3 games.
A reminder that DK and Ramon on the Ramon Foster show coming up in about 35 minutes or so here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Those Steelers practice today, obviously with the
definitely. Even if they were scheduled to have practice today, I don't think they would have been practicing.
They weren't going to make it. But that was a scheduled day off. That wasn't because of what happened with their flight itinerary. That was a scheduled day off. The team will be off tomorrow, but Mike Tomlin will talk, of course, as he does every Tuesday at noon Eastern. A few more comments here, and if you like Chris Collinsworth,
I like dude. What's wrong with Toy Story?
Great movie, one of my favorites.
What's wrong with Toy Story? That's like probably my second favorite Disney movie of all time.
Mine would be The Lion King, and
Lion King's one. That's
my mom loved Beauty and the Beast, still does.
Beauty and the Beast is up there too.
That was a popular one.
The OG's awesome.
Toy
Story's great. Ryan, when I say listen. When you work in the media, and it doesn't matter if you're a beat writer, if you're a columnist, if you're a TV broadcaster, listen, I can't even begin to describe how bad I would be at doing either play-by-play or color commentary on TV. I would be awful at it. I am in no place to be telling anybody who does that job like you need to do it better or anything. Like I'm the last person whatsoever. I'm
that easy. I'm speaking from actual experience. It's not that easy. You have to keep track of a lot of stuff. You have to pay attention. You have to be aware of just about everything that you possibly could. So doing any sort of broadcast, whether it's radio or television, especially radio, I would argue, is not easy at all.
The only criticism I can possibly really, really honestly give Chris Collinsworth, and it's just one to be funny, is my wife says his voice does not match his face. And that just cracks me up because I've seen him be on TV for, I've been watching football for over 30 years and he's been on TV for a long time. And so I'm just always used to hearing that voice with his face, and she just it messes with my mind. I don't like it. It does not match. So that would be the only criticism, but he can't control that.
Now, I believe I got to do a quick double check. Yes, we're not going to hear from Chris Collinsworth on a Steelers broadcast, perhaps, until week 16. Of course, flexing could apply, but
the
Steelers are a 4:30 kick on NBC against the Bengals on December 23rd. So, at minimum, the Chris Collinsworth haters, complainers, enjoyers, whoever you are.
I stirred a pot, apparently.
Enjoyers, yeah, whatever. Are going to have to wait until then. For now, though, Chris and I are out of here. It has been 30 minutes, and we appreciate you all tuning in, checking in, commenting, hanging out, whatever it may have been.
Yeah, the final take,
you are.
Corey?
Final take.
Final thought?
Yes. I'm not sure what the AFC North is this year yet. Like, the Steelers haven't been incredibly impressive. Baltimore just lost to Gardner Minshew and the Colts. The Browns are
really curious.
What are they? Joe Burrow's banged up. Like, I don't know what the AFC North is quite yet. And usually by now we'd have an idea of, like, who's going to start to separate. We're not there yet with this division.
I'm not going to leave you with a football comment. I just saw earlier that Hodge 3115 said, I feel like it could be anything. Matt's ego seems to be the size of Texas. Just going to drop you with something like here on this. Texas is larger than you probably think. The midway point between Dallas and San Diego is El Paso.
Good comment. I've been to El Paso.
The midway point between Dallas and San Diego, which is like 1,200 miles or something like that, is El Paso. That is a 10-hour drive from Dallas to El Paso.
It's funny you mentioned that because,
and yes, as Smith family says, Alaska's even bigger. So I can't even begin to fathom. I have driven all across this state that I live in. It's massive. I can't believe how big it is. And Alaska's even bigger. I don't even want to try to think about that.
When I flew to El Paso last year, I had to connect through Dallas. And in your mind, you're like, oh, that's in the state of Texas. It's not going to be a long, connecting flight going from Dallas to El Paso. Boy, was I wrong. Which makes the story, if you remember last year, the story of the 3 Pitt football players who got stuck at the Dallas airport. And then UTEP's basketball coach gave them a ride overnight to get from Dallas to
10-hour drive.
10-hour overnight. Drive. Right. Makes that story even more incredible. All right. Chris and I are on to Tuesday. Those of you listening in, you're on to DK and Ramon in about 28 minutes or so. He's Chris. I'm Corey. This has been the Southside Beat on a Victory Monday. Talk to you tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.